I used to think being the black sheep was a joke until my family laughed in unison, and I realized they believed it. 3 days later, I froze the accounts. 1 week later, a moving truck arrived, but when a thick envelope landed in my mailbox proving my brother wanted to steal my entire career, I made a choice. I would not scream or cry online. If they want a show, I am going to be the one turning on the bright lights. My name is Josephine Gray, and on the day I finally held my degree in my hands, my family decided to remind me that a piece of paper could not buy their respect. The heat in Cedar Hollow, Colorado, was stifling that afternoon. It was the kind of dry, high-altitude heat that made your skin feel tight and your thirst unquenchable. My parents had transformed their backyard into something out of a lifestyle magazine. There were strings of Edison bulbs zigzagging overhead, white linen tablecloths that fluttered in the occasional breeze, and enough floral arrangements to bury a small sedan. It was beautiful. It was expensive. And as I walked through the crowd, clutching a glass of lukewarm lemonade, I realized that very few people here actually knew what I had studied or what I did for a living. They were here for the spectacle. They were here because my mother, Marianne, had summoned them. I was 24 years old. I had just graduated with honors while simultaneously running a marketing and design agency for small businesses from my laptop. I had spent the last 2 years functioning on 4 hours of sleep a night, balancing finals with client deadlines, often coding websites or drafting brand strategies, until the sun came up over the Rockies. I was tired. I was proud. I thought, perhaps foolishly, that today was about acknowledging that grind. I thought this party was a celebration of the fact that I had built something solid, something real, entirely on my own. But in the Caldwell Gray household, reality was always secondary to the performance. The chatter was loud, a mix of neighborhood gossip and polite congratulations. I moved through the clusters of aunts and uncles, accepting their hugs and the envelopes that felt thin in my hands. I played the part of the grateful daughter perfectly. I smiled until my cheeks ached. I nodded when they asked if I was going to find a real job now, biting my tongue instead of explaining that my side business was already netting more than the starting salary of the corporate positions they idolized. I let them believe I was still finding my way. It was safer that way. It kept the peace. Then the music cut out. The screech of a microphone being tapped echoed off the siding of the house. I turned toward the patio, shielding my eyes against the glare of the setting sun. My brother, Derek, was standing on the elevated wooden deck. He was 30 years old, 6 years my senior, and he looked every inch the golden child my parents had always insisted he was. He wore a crisp linen suit that I knew cost more than my first car, and he held a plastic cup of beer aloft with the confidence of a man addressing his subjects. Derek had a way of standing that demanded attention. He did not ask for the room's focus. He assumed it was his birthright. The crowd hushed. My mother, standing near the punch bowl, clasped her hands together and beamed up at him. Her eyes were shining with an adoration that she rarely directed anywhere else. Derek cleared his throat. He flashed that charming, lopsided grin that had gotten him out of trouble since he was 5. "Josephine," he said, his voice booming through the rented speakers. "Where is the graduate?" I raised my hand from the back of the lawn, offering a small, tight wave. I wanted this to be over. I wanted to go home, take off my heels, and sleep for 14 hours. "There she is," Derek announced, pointing a finger at me. "Everyone, look at her." Our little Joey finally made it across the finish line. There was a ripple of polite applause. Derek waited for it to die down before he continued. "You know, it is funny. I was thinking about this morning, watching her walk across that stage. We all know the path has not been exactly straight for everyone in this family. We have had our ups and downs, but today, we celebrate." He paused for effect. He loved the pause. He loved the tension of a room waiting on his next word. "So," he said, raising his cup higher, a wicked glint entering his eyes, "let us have a toast. Let us toast to the family black sheep, who finally decided to join the rest of us in the real world. Cheers, Josie." The silence that followed was brief, but it was absolute. Then, the laughter started. It began with a few chuckles from his college friends in the corner, but it spread. It rolled across the yard like a wave. It was not a warm laugh. It was not the affectionate laughter of people sharing an inside joke. It was the laughter of confirmation. They were laughing because they agreed. They were laughing because Derek had just said the quiet part out loud. I stood frozen near the rose bushes. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold despite the 80-degree heat. Black sheep, the term hung in the air, toxic and heavy. I looked at my mother. Surely, she would step in. Surely, she would frown or shake her head or tell him that was too far. Instead, Marianne threw her head back and laughed the loudest of them all. She clapped her hands, looking around at her friends as if to say, "Isn't he hilarious? Aren't we such a fun, dynamic family?" She was normalizing my humiliation. She was signaling to every guest that it was okay to treat me like the punchline. I felt a physical blow to my chest, but I did not flinch. I did not run. I did not let a single tear form in my eyes. I forced the corners of my mouth up. I locked my jaw and pasted a smile on my face that was terrifyingly hollow. I played the role of the girl who could take a joke. I nodded, raising my glass of lemonade in a mock salute, acknowledging the toast. But behind my sunglasses, my eyes were not smiling. My eyes were cameras, recording everything. I looked at Uncle Robert, who was wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. Recorded. I looked at the neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, who was whispering something to her husband behind her hand while giggling. Recorded. I looked at Derek, who was basking in the glow of the crowd's amusement, looking down at me with a smug satisfaction that said he had put me back in my place. Recorded. And I looked at my mother, who was so busy enjoying her son's performance that she did not even glance at her daughter to see if the knife had cut deep. Recorded. The irony was suffocating. Derek, the golden boy, had been unemployed for 2 years. He called himself an entrepreneur. He spent his days sitting in coffee shops, working on startup ideas that never launched, pitching concepts that were nothing more than buzzwords strung together. He drove a leased luxury car he could not afford. He lived in a townhouse he did not pay for. I was the one paying for it. The realization hit me with the force of a physical slap. Even though I had known the facts for months, I was the black sheep. I was the one who needed to join the real world. I was the one who had wired $2,000 to the joint account last month so Derek would not be evicted. I was the one who paid the premiums on the family cell phone plan because my parents forgot, and Derek claimed he was between liquidity events. I was the one who had quietly absorbed the costs of his latest website domain fees because he promised me that investors were knocking down his door. I looked at him up there, preening like a peacock. He did not look like a man who had borrowed rent money from his little sister 3 weeks ago. He looked like a king, and I was his financier. The rest of the party was a blur. I accepted more congratulations. I laughed at more jokes. I let my mother hug me and whisper that I shouldn't be so sensitive if I looked stiff. I ate a piece of cake that tasted like sawdust. When the sun finally dipped below the horizon and the string lights began to glow against the twilight, I made my excuses. I told them I had a headache. I told them I was exhausted from the ceremony. "You are always running off," Derek said as I walked toward the gate, a beer bottle dangling from his fingers. "Stay. The party is just getting started. Do not be such a drag." "Josie, I have work in the morning," I said, my voice steady. "Work," he scoffed. "Right. Your little computer thing. Good luck with that." I did not turn back. I walked to my car, a sensible 4-year-old sedan I had paid for in cash, and I drove away. The drive to my apartment was silent. I did not turn on the radio. I needed the quiet to organize the chaos in my head. The anger was there, a hot, roiling thing in my gut. But underneath it was something colder, something sharper, clarity. I lived in a modest 1-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. It was clean, quiet, and mine. I unlocked the door, kicked off my heels, and didn't even bother turning on the main lights. I walked straight to the kitchen island and opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the darkness. My fingers flew across the keys. entering passwords I had memorized long ago. I pulled up the banking portal. There it was, the joint account. It was an account I had opened with Derek 4 years ago. Back then, he had convinced me it was for a joint venture, a sibling partnership. He had the vision. I had the technical skills. We were going to build an empire. The empire never happened. The account, however, remained. And over the years, it had morphed into something else entirely. It had become a funnel. I poured money in from my side business money I earned from designing logos, managing social media campaigns, and building e-commerce sites, and Derek drained it out. I scrolled through the transaction history. Starbucks, $50, gas station, $80, liquor store, $120, electronics store, $400, rent payment for the townhouse, $2,500. The numbers blurred together. I clicked on the transfer history. My contributions were regular, consistent, 1,000 here, 2,000 there, 500 for an emergency, 300 for groceries because Mom said he was having a hard week. I sat there in the dark, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. I looked at the total. Over the last 18 months, I had transferred nearly $35,000 into this account. $35,000. That was a down payment on a house. That was a year of travel. That was my safety net. My hard work, my sleepless nights. And tonight, the man who spent that money had stood on a stage and called me the black sheep. He had invited our entire community to laugh at me. He had used my graduation, my milestone, to elevate himself and diminish me. I looked at the screen until my eyes burned. I am not the black sheep. I whispered to the empty room. I am the golden goose. For years, I had told myself I was helping family. I told myself that Derek was just going through a rough patch. I told myself that my parents appreciated my stability, even if they didn't celebrate it. But tonight, the veil had been lifted. They didn't appreciate me. They didn't even respect me. They saw me as a resource. I was the sturdy, boring mule that carried the load, so the show pony could prance around in the spotlight. I thought about my mother's laugh, that harsh, barking sound. She knew Derek borrowed money from me. She knew I paid his rent, and yet, she let him stand there and mock me, because in her world, Derek's ego was more important than my dignity. I felt a tear finally escape, tracking hot down my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. No more crying. I looked at the date on the screen. It was Tuesday. According to the bank's policy, transfers and account closures took anywhere from 24 to 48 hours to process fully, especially if I wanted to do it in a way that left no loose ends. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I could scream. I could write a long, emotional Facebook post exposing them all. I could call my mother right now and scream until my throat bled. But that is what the black sheep would do. The unstable, emotional little sister. That would just prove them right. They would say I was hysterical. They would say I couldn't take a joke. I needed to be something else. I needed to be the business owner they didn't believe I was. I opened a new tab on my browser. I pulled up the lease agreement for Derek's townhouse, which had my name on it as a guarantor. I pulled up the access logs for the freelance contracts I had subcontracted to him, the ones he hadn't touched in weeks. I am not going to say a word. I thought, I am going to let the reality they ignored crash down on them. I looked at the calendar. 3 days. In 3 days. The rent was due. In 3 days. The automatic transfer was scheduled to hit the joint account. In 3 days. Derek was planning to host an after-party for his friends at the townhouse I was paying for. I hovered my mouse over the settings button on the bank account. I wondered if Derek knew how much milk cost. I wondered if he knew what happened when the electricity bill didn't get paid. I wondered if he knew that the black sheep was the only thing standing between him and the street. He was about to find out. I did not click anything yet. I simply stared at the screen, a cold resolve settling into my bones. I was done funding the audience that laughed at me. I shut the laptop with a soft click. The room plunged back into darkness. 3 days. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights of Cedar Hollow. They looked different tonight. They didn't look like home anymore. They looked like a battlefield. If my family wanted a show, I would give them one. But this time, I would be the one controlling the lighting, and when I turned the switch off, they were going to find themselves in the dark. The morning after the graduation party, I woke up to a silence so profound it felt heavy. There was no hangover from alcohol, but there was a distinct, throbbing headache from the emotional toxicity I had swallowed along with the lukewarm lemonade. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of the apartment I paid for, and I allowed myself to dissect the history that had led to that microphone moment. It was not a sudden development. In the Caldwell household, roles were assigned at birth, much like royal titles, but with far less dignity. Derek was the crown prince. I was the servant who cleaned the stables. From the time we were children, Derek had a gravitational pull that warped the reality of everyone around him. If he drew a stick figure, my mother, Mary Ann, would frame it and declare him a budding visionary. If I brought home a straight-A report card, it was met with a distracted nod and a comment about how I was so lucky that school came easy to me, implying that hard work had nothing to do with it. Whenever I achieved something that threatened to outshine Derek, the family mechanism would kick in to level the playing field. They did not scold me. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they used humor. They used the joke. When I won the state science fair in high school, my father, Gordon, chuckled at dinner and said I was going to turn into a mad scientist who never got invited to prom. When I got my first major client for my design business at 22, Derek joked that I was just coloring pictures for money. They minimized me to keep him comfortable. I rolled out of bed and made coffee, the dark liquid swirling in the mug as I stood by the window. I thought about the term black sheep, usually. That label is reserved for the family screw-up, the one who gets arrested, or drops out of school, or cannot hold down a job. But in my family, the definition was inverted. I was the black sheep because I did not follow the script of codependency. I did not ask for money. That was my first sin. By being financially independent, I denied Marianne the leverage she craved. She could not control what she did not pay for. I did not flatter them. That was my second sin. I refused to nod along when Derek spun his tales of grandeur, and I did not participate in the silent agreement that we must all set ourselves on fire to keep Derek warm. That was the crux of it, the startup. I sat down at my kitchen island, the wood cool under my forearms. I could almost hear Derek's voice from 2 years ago, pitching me the idea. It was going to be a revolutionary platform. He had said, a disruptor. He had used so many buzzwords that the air in the room felt thin. He needed a partner. He needed someone with technical skills to build the back end while he handled the big picture strategy. I had hesitated. I knew his track record. But then came the guilt. Come on, Joey, he had said, using the nickname I hated. Do you not believe in me? Mom says you are too critical. Prove her wrong. Help your brother build a legacy. So I signed. I signed as a co-borrower on a business loan because his credit score was in the low 500s. I signed a contract that gave me equity in a company that produced nothing. And then, the slow bleed began. It started with small transfers. $500 for server costs, $200 for a networking lunch. Then, it escalated. I opened my laptop, bypassing the social media tabs where I knew photos of the party were likely circulating, and went straight to my digital filing cabinet. I pulled up the lease agreement for the townhouse on the edge of the city. Derek and his wife, Sienna, lived there. It was a nice place. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, a garage, much nicer than my apartment. When they moved in, Derek had claimed it was essential for his image. He could not meet investors in a dump, but he could not make the deposit. It is just for a few months, Marianne had told me over the phone, her voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper she used when she was brokering a deal between her children. Just until his seed funding comes through. You have savings. Josephine, do not be hoarding it when your brother has a baby on the way, potentially. There was no baby. There was never a baby. But the implication that I was selfish for having savings while Derek had dreams was enough to make me open my wallet. I paid the deposit. Then I paid the first month, then the second. Now, it had been 8 months, and I was essentially paying a mortgage for a home I did not have a key to. I heard the front door unlock, breaking my trance. Miles walked in. My boyfriend of 2 years carried 2 coffees and a bag of bagels. He stopped when he saw me sitting at the island, my hair messy, surrounded by invisible clouds of tension. Miles was the antithesis of the Caldwell men. He was a carpenter. He worked with his hands. He said what he meant, and he paid his own bills. He was solid earth to my family's hot air. He set the coffee down in front of me. I saw the photos, he said quietly. I flinched. I did not want to know what the caption said. I'm not talking about social media, Miles continued, pulling out a stool. I am talking about the look on your face in the background of your cousin's selfie. You look like you were planning a murder or a funeral. I am just not sure which one yet. I took a sip of the coffee. It was hot. Grounding. Derek called me the black sheep. I said, my voice flat. Miles nodded slowly. I heard, my sister called me. She thought it was incredibly rude. By the way, she asked if you were okay. He thinks it is a joke. I said, they all do. They think my life is a cute little hobby and that my money is a community chest. Miles looked at me, his dark eyes serious. He had never pushed me to cut them off. He knew that family dynamics were complicated, like a knot that tightens when you pull too hard. But he had always been the mirror I needed. Josephine, he said, using my full name, you know I love you. But you are not a black sheep to them. You are an ATM. And last night, that was not a joke. That was him marking his territory. He humiliated you to remind you that no matter how much you pay, he is still the one holding the microphone. His words hit me harder than the toast had. Marking his territory. That was exactly what it was. By labeling me the black sheep, Derek was preemptively discrediting me. If I ever complained about the money, if I ever tried to call in the debts, he could just shrug and say, oh, that is just Josie being the black sheep. She is always causing drama. She is always against us. He was using my reputation to shield his incompetence. I looked at Miles. You are right. I know, Miles said, taking a bite of his bagel. The question is, what are you going to do? Because if you write another check, you are not helping him. You are just paying for the stage he stands on to mock you. I am not writing any more checks, I said. I stood up and went to the printer in the corner of my living room. I hit the power button. The machine whirred to life, a mechanical sound that felt like the cocking of a weapon. I spent the next 4 hours doing something I should have done years ago. I did not cry. I did not rage. I became an auditor. I downloaded every bank statement from the last 4 years. I highlighted every transfer that went from my personal account to the joint account, or directly to Derek, or to Marianne for family emergencies that turned out to be Derek's emergencies. I printed the email threads, the ones where Derek promised, in writing, that the money was a loan. Hey sis, just need $2,000 for the prototype. Investor money hits on the 1st. You will get it back with interest. I swear. That was dated 18 months ago. I printed the text messages where Sienna thanked me for covering the rent, adding heart emojis as if they were currency. You are the best. We would be on the street without you. Derek is going to make it big soon. I promise I printed the contract for the business loan. I highlighted the clause that stated both borrowers were jointly and severally liable, but I also found the side agreement Derek and I had signed a simple document I had insisted on, stating that he was responsible for the principal payments since the capital was for his use. He had signed it laughing, calling me a stickler for paperwork. That stickler was about to ruin his year. As the stack of paper grew, the weight on my chest began to lift. This was not vengeance. I told myself, this was insurance. My family operated on gaslighting. If I confronted them without proof, they would twist reality. They would say I was misremembering. They would say I offered the money as a gift. They would say I was being petty and counting pennies between family members. But paper does not forget. Numbers do not have emotions. A bank transfer of $2,500 on the 1st of the month is a fact, not an opinion. Miles watched me from the couch, reading a book. But I knew he was keeping guard. He saw the shift in me. For years, I had been the daughter who tried to buy love with compliance. Today, I was the business owner protecting her assets. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Derek. "Hey, great party last night. Sorry if the toast was a little rough. Just having fun. By the way, rent is due Tuesday. Can you make sure the transfer clears early? Landlord was being a pain last month. Thanks, sis." I stared at the screen. No remorse, no awareness. Just a non-apology followed immediately by a demand for cash. He really believed I was trapped. He believed that the shame of being the black sheep would keep me in line, desperate to prove I was good, generous, and loyal. I did not reply. I took a screenshot of the text and added it to a folder on my desktop named Evidence. Then I looked at the total sum of the transfers I had highlighted. It was staggering. It was enough to start a real business. It was enough to travel the world. It was enough to walk away and never look back. I realized then that I had been paying a subscription fee for a family that did not want me. I was buying a seat at a table where I was the only one bringing food, and they were still throwing scraps at me. I turned to Miles. "I am not going to argue with them," I said. Miles looked up, marking his page. "Good. Arguing implies they have a valid point to counter. I am going to change the rules," I said. I picked up the stack of papers, the edges sharp against my fingertips. "They think I am the black sheep, fine. I will be the wolf. But I am done being the shepherd for their mess." I looked at the date on the calendar. Sunday. The banks were closed, but the online portals were open. The scheduling tools were active. I sat back down at the computer. My heart was beating in a slow, steady rhythm. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, hard determination. I was about to detonate the foundation of Derek's life, simply by removing the pillars I had built for him. I remembered the faces of my relatives laughing in the backyard. I remembered Marianne's cackle. Let them laugh. I thought, I hope they enjoyed the show, because the ticket price just went up, and nobody in that house can afford it anymore. I organized the papers into a neat pile. Tomorrow, I would make the calls. Tomorrow, the side business girl was going to show them exactly how the real world operated, and the first lesson was going to be expensive. Monday morning arrived with the clinical precision of a scalpel. I sat at my desk at 9 o'clock sharp. The coffee in my mug was black. The curtains were drawn to cut the glare on my monitors, and my phone was set to silent. The emotional storm of the weekend had passed, leaving behind a landscape that was stark, gray, and perfectly clear. I was not a sister today. I was a creditor closing a bad account. I dialed the number on the back of my debit card. I did not use the app. I wanted to hear a human voice confirm the destruction I was about to unleash. "Thank you for calling First Horizon Bank." A woman's voice chirped. "My name is Brenda. How can I help you today?" "Good morning, Brenda," I said. My voice was steady, devoid of the tremor that used to seize me whenever I had to make a decision that might upset my family. "I am the primary account holder for a joint business checking account ending in 452. I need to make some immediate changes to the authorized user list." I verified my identity. I gave her my social security number. I answered the security question about my first pet, a golden retriever named Buster, who had liked me more than he liked Derek, a fact my brother still resented. "I see Mr. Derek Caldwell listed as an authorized signer with full withdrawal privileges," Brenda said. "What changes would you like to make?" "I want him removed," I said, effectively immediately. "I also need to report the debit card, ending in 889, the one in his possession, as compromised. Please cancel it, and do not issue a replacement to his address." There was a pause on the line. I could hear the clicking of a keyboard. It was the sound of a lifeline being severed. "I understand," Brenda said. "Just so you know, this will decline any pending transactions initiated by that card number. That is the intention," I replied. When the call ended, I did not sigh. I did not lean back. I opened my email client. For the past year, Derek had employed a small team of freelancers to work on the branding and back end of his startup. There was a graphic designer in Portland and a copywriter in Austin. They were talented people. They were also people I had hired, Derek had played the boss, zooming them for hours about his vision, but I was the one who signed the contracts. I was the one whose signature was on the liability clause. I composed a single email. I blind copied all of them to save time. Subject notice of contract termination and payment suspension. To whom it may concern, effective immediately, all work on the Caldwell Venture project is to be halted. The funding for this project has been frozen. Any further hours billed after 10 in the morning today. Monday, June 24th, will not be compensated by the undersigned. Please submit your final invoices for work completed up to this date. Do not transfer any further assets, files, or login credentials to Derek Caldwell until outstanding balances are settled. Direct all future inquiries regarding project continuation to Mr. Caldwell directly, as I am resigning my position as financial guarantor. Regards, Josephine Gray. I hit send. It was 10:15 in the morning. I had just fired my brother from his own life. The silence in my apartment held for exactly 12 minutes. Then, my phone lit up. The name Derek flashed on the screen. I watched it vibrate against the mahogany of my desk. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately, then a third time. He was not calling because he missed me. He was not calling to apologize for the toast. He was calling because he was standing at a register somewhere, holding a piece of plastic that was now just a scraper for his windshield. I picked up on the fourth ring. I did not say hello. I simply pressed the green button and held the phone to my ear. What the hell is going on? Derek's voice was high, tight with a mix of panic and fury. I am at the gas station. The card was declined. The guy ran it 3 times. There is a line of cars behind me. Josie. Fix it. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not ask if there was a bank error. He commanded me to fix it, assuming that my role in the universe was to smooth the pavement before he walked on it. It is not an error. I said, "What do you mean?" Transfer the money. I have a meeting in an hour. I need gas. Stop playing games. I am not playing. I said, I removed you from the account. The card is canceled. There was a stunned silence on the other end, followed by the sound of a car horn honking in the background. You did what he shouted. Are you crazy? That is my company account. It is an account under my name, funded by my earnings, which you use to buy liquor and video games. I said, and as of this morning, the black sheep is done paying for the shepherd. Use your own card. I do not have money on my own card. You know that you are stranding me. Then call Mom, I said, and I hung up. I placed the phone face down on the desk. My heart was beating faster now, but it was not the erratic rhythm of fear. It was the adrenaline of combat. 5 minutes later, the secondary wave hit. Marianne's ringtone was a cheerful classical melody she had selected herself. It sounded grotesque in the context of the moment. I answered, Josephine. My mother's voice was sharp, breathless. Derek just called me. He is hysterical. He says you cut him off. He says he is stuck at a gas station on the highway. He is 30 years old. Mom, I said, he can walk, or he can use the cash I know you gave him for his birthday last week. That is not the point, she snapped. You cannot just pull the rug out from under your brother like this. He has pressure on him. He is trying to build something. You are ruining his future over a petty grudge. A petty grudge, I repeated. The words tasted like ash. He stood in front of 50 people, including my colleagues and professors, and called me the black sheep. I said, he humiliated me. And you laughed. Oh, stop it. She dismissed me, just as I knew she would. It was a joke. You are being too sensitive. You always take things so seriously. That is why you are unhappy, Josephine, because you cannot take a joke. Now, turn that card back on. He has a lunch meeting with a potential investor. If he misses this, it is on your head. No. I said, excuse me, I said no. I am not funding him anymore. I am not paying for his gas. I am not paying for his drinks. And I am certainly not paying for him to drive around pretending to be a CEO while he mocks the person who pays his bills. Josephine, you listen to me. Her voice dropped, becoming low and dangerous. We are family. Family helps each other. You have been blessed with success. and it is your duty to help your brother until he gets on his feet. Do not make me come over there. Do not make this ugly. It is already ugly, I said. You just did not notice because the check always cleared. I took a breath. I had one more lever to pull. I had planned to save it for later, but her entitlement forced my hand. And since we are talking about duty, I said, I sent a certified letter to your house and to Derek's townhouse this morning, but I will tell you now so you can prepare. Prepare for what she asked, wariness creeping into her tone. I am terminating the payment assistance for the townhouse, I said. The silence on the line was absolute. I paid the deposit and the last 8 months of rent. I continued, my voice calm, factual. I have been sending $2,500 directly to the landlord on the 1st of every month. I have canceled that standing order. The lease is in Derek's name. Next month, the rent is his responsibility. You cannot do that, she whispered. They will be evicted. Then he should get a job. I said, he has a job. He is an entrepreneur. He is unemployed, Mom, and I am done paying for his role play. I hung up before she could scream. I sat there, staring at the blank wall. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from regret. It was the aftershock of breaking a bone that had healed wrong, so it could finally be set right. The phone vibrated again. A text from Derek. You are a psycho. Seriously, you are having a breakdown. I am worried about you. Turn the money back on and we can talk about getting you some help. You are destroying this family because you have intimacy issues. Gaslighting. Textbook. Grade A gaslighting. He was trying to frame my boundary as mental illness. He was trying to make me doubt my own reality. He wanted me to believe that refusing to be robbed was a symptom of insanity. I did not reply. I took a screenshot. I dragged it into the folder. Then I opened my banking portal again. I watched the numbers. The balance in my personal savings account was sitting there, untouched. For the first time in 2 years, I knew that number would be the same tomorrow. It would not shrink because Derek needed a new suit. It would not vanish because Derek had a vision. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. I waited for the guilt. I had been trained for 2 decades to feel guilty whenever I displeased them. I waited for the crushing weight of being the bad daughter, the selfish sister. But it did not come. Instead, I took a breath, and then another. The air seemed to go deeper into my lungs than it ever had before. It was cool and crisp. I looked at the clock. It was 11 in the morning. I had just cut off the financial oxygen to the people who had been suffocating me, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't holding my breath. I was breathing. I turned back to my work monitors. I had a client meeting at noon, a real client, someone who paid me, someone who respected my time. I picked up my mouse and clicked on a design file. The colors on the screen looked brighter. The lines looked sharper. Let them call. I thought, let them scream. The bank is closed. I started to work, and the silence in the apartment was no longer heavy. It was golden. The text message from my mother arrived on Wednesday afternoon. It was brief, devoid of the usual emojis, and carried the weight of a royal decree. Family dinner, Thursday, 7 o'clock. Do not be late. We need to reset. I stared at the screen. The word reset was doing a lot of heavy lifting. In the lexicon of the Caldwell family, a reset did not mean an apology or a change in behavior. It meant sweeping the debris under the rug and pretending the house wasn't built on a sinkhole. It was an ambush. I knew it. They knew I knew it, but I also knew that if I did not go, they would spin my absence into a narrative of cowardice. They would say I was hiding because I knew I was wrong. I decided to attend. But I was not going as the daughter seeking approval. I was going as a foreign diplomat entering hostile territory. I dressed with intention. I chose a black blazer, sharp and tailored, over a white silk blouse. It was what I wore to meet with bank loan officers or difficult clients. It was armor. When I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house, the scene was aggressively normal. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. The porch light was on. My father's sedan was parked next to Derek's leased luxury SUV. Seeing that car triggered a spike of irritation in my chest. I knew for a fact that the lease payment was due in 10 days, and for the first time in 2 years, the money was not sitting in the joint account waiting to be claimed. I walked up the path and opened the front door without knocking. The smell hit me first. Roast beef, rosemary, and the heavy cloying scent of my mother's expensive potpourri. It was the smell of my childhood, a sensory trigger that usually made me feel safe, but tonight made my stomach turn. I walked into the dining room. The table was already set. Marianne had brought out the good china, the pieces with the gold rim that were usually reserved for Christmas or Easter. The chandelier was dimmed to a warm glow. It was a stage set for a reconciliation scene in a Hallmark movie. "Hello, everyone," I said. My voice was cool, level. They were already seated. My father, Gordon, sat at the head of the table. He looked older tonight. The lines around his mouth were deep, and he was staring at his empty plate with a focus that suggested he was trying to solve a complex math problem. He did not look up when I entered. Marianne was bustling in from the kitchen, carrying a platter of roasted vegetables. She was wearing a floral dress and a smile that was too wide, too bright, and entirely frantic. "Josephine, you made it." She set the platter down and moved to hug me. I stiffened, allowing the embrace but not returning it. She smelled of white wine and denial. "Sit, sit. Derek and Sienna are already here." I looked across the table. Derek was sitting in his usual spot, to the right of my father. He looked relaxed, almost bored. He was leaning back in his chair, one arm draped over the back, swirling a glass of red wine. He met my gaze with a look that was assessing. He was trying to figure out if I had cracked yet. He wanted to know if the silence of the last 3 days was a bluff or a permanent state of affairs. Next to him sat Sienna. My sister-in-law looked like she wanted to be anywhere else on the planet. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her hands were busy shredding a paper cocktail napkin in her lap. She offered me a quick, nervous smile that didn't reach her eyes, then looked down at her lap immediately. I took my seat across from Derek. "So," Marianne said, clapping her hands together as she sat opposite Gordon. "Let us eat. Gordon, carve the beef, please." My father stood up and began to slice the meat. The sound of the knife scraping against the sharpening steel was the only noise in the room. Shk, shk, shk. It was rhythmic and aggressive. For the first 10 minutes, the only conversation was performative. Marianne talked about the weather. She talked about the neighbor's new landscaping. She talked about a sale at the department store. She was throwing words into the void, desperate to fill the silence that the rest of us were maintaining. Derek ate with gusto. He chewed loudly, acting as if he hadn't a care in the world. He asked for the salt. He complimented the potatoes. He was signaling that he was unaffected. I ate nothing. I cut my meat into small, precise squares, moving them around the plate. Finally, Marianne set her fork down. The inevitable pivot arrived. "You know," she began, her voice taking on a tone of reasonable, maternal concern, "I think it is silly that we are all sitting here with this tension. Families fight. It happens. But the important thing is that we do not let small misunderstandings turn into permanent damage." She looked at me. Her eyes were hard, despite the smile. "Josephine, darling," she continued, "Derek told me about the banking confusion and the email to the freelancers. I know you are upset about the toast at the party. It was insensitive. Derek admits that." I looked at Derek. He smirked, taking a sip of wine. "Yeah," he said, "it was a joke. Joe, I was just roasting you. You know, like they do on TV. I didn't think you would go nuclear and freeze the assets. That is a bit dramatic. Do you not think I did not answer?" I kept my face blank. This was the trap. They wanted me to argue. They wanted me to say, it wasn't a joke, it was cruel. Because if I said that, they could attack my tone. They could say I was shouting. They could say I was hysterical. They could shift the conversation from what he did to how I reacted. I refused to give them the ammunition. Marianne waited for me to speak. When I didn't, she pressed on. "The point is," she said, pouring herself more wine, "you have made your point. You are angry. We get it. But punishing your brother by sabotaging his company is not the way to handle it. We need to be constructive. So, I think you should reactivate the cards tonight, and Derek will apologize for the toast. That seems fair, does it not? She framed it as a compromise. I give him back his livelihood, and he gives me 2 words. I took a sip of water. I placed the glass down gently. I looked at my mother, then at Derek, and then I went back to cutting my meat. Derek let out a short, scoffing laugh. See, he said to Marianne, she is doing that stonewalling thing. She thinks she is better than everyone else because she made a little money. Josephine, Marianne's voice sharpened. I am speaking to you. Do not be rude. Your brother has bills to pay. He has employees depending on him. You have a responsibility here. I still said nothing. I looked at Sienna. She was staring at her plate, her face pale. She knew. She knew exactly why I had cut the funding. She knew about the townhouse rent. She knew about the lies. And yet, she sat there, silent. Marianne slammed her hand on the table. The silverware rattled. Answer me, she snapped. This is ridiculous. You are acting like a child. We are a family. You cannot just cut us off because your feelings were hurt. I looked up, ready to deliver the sentence I had prepared. But before I could open my mouth, a heavy sound interrupted us. It was the sound of my father dropping his fork onto his plate. Clatter. Gordon Caldwell had been a silent fixture in my life for 24 years. He was a man who preferred to read the newspaper rather than intervene in domestic disputes. He usually let Marianne run the show while he retreated to the garage. But tonight, Gordon placed his hands flat on the table. He did not look at Marianne. He looked directly at Derek. She is not acting like a child, Gordon said. His voice was low, gravelly, and completely devoid of the hesitation that usually defined him. Marianne blinked, stunned by the interruption. Gordon, please, I am handling this. You are not handling anything, Gordon said. You are badgering her. He turned his eyes to me. There was something in them I hadn't seen before, a mix of shame and resignation. Then he looked back at his son. You stood up in front of 60 people. Derek, my father said. You stood up there and you mocked her. You called her a black sheep. You laughed at her. It was a toast. Dad, Derek said, rolling his eyes. God, everyone is so soft these days. It was not a toast, Gordon said. His voice rose, just a fraction. But it felt like thunder in the small room. It was an insult. You took the one moment that belonged to her, and you made it about you. You made her look small so you could feel big. Gordon? Marianne hissed. Whose side are you on? I am on the side of reality, Gordon snapped. He pointed a calloused finger at Derek. You have not worked a real job in 3 years. You drive a car that costs more than my annual pension. You live in a house you cannot afford. And for years, I kept my mouth shut because your mother said you just needed time. She said you were building something. He looked at me, and for a second, his eyes softened. But she was the one building it, Gordon said. She was the one paying for it. I saw the statements. Marianne, I saw what you tried to hide in the junk drawer. Marianne went pale. So let me get this straight, Gordon continued. Locking eyes with Derek, you bite the hand that feeds you, and then you come to my table and complain that you are hungry. The room went deadly silent. I felt a shockwave go through me. In my entire life, I had never heard my father speak to Derek like that. Derek looked as if he had been slapped. His arrogance faltered for the first time. Dad, you do not understand business, Derek stammered. It is complex. The liquidity is tied up in... Stop it. Gordon cut him off. Just stop lying. You are not a businessman. Derek, you are a grifter, and you have been grifting your sister. Gordon Marianne shrieked. She stood up, her face flushed red. How dare you? How dare you speak to your son that way? He is trying his best. He is under so much pressure, you should be supporting him, not tearing him down like her. She pointed a shaking finger at me. Derek seized the opening. He saw that his mother was taking the heat, so he leaned back, letting the smirk return to his face. He was safe again. Mommy was fighting the dragon. I looked at him. He was 30 years old, and he was hiding behind his mother's skirt while she screamed at his father. Then I looked at Sienna. She had stopped shredding the napkin. She was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. Her eyes darted to me, terrified. She wasn't just afraid of the argument. She was afraid of what was going to happen next. She looked like someone who was watching a dam crack, knowing she was standing in the flood zone. Marianne was still yelling at Gordon, listing his failures as a father, deflecting the blame onto him to protect her golden boy. I realized then that this would never end. There was no conversation to be had. There was no logic that could penetrate their delusion. My father had woken up. Yes, but he was 20 years too late. Marianne would browbeat him into silence eventually. She would wear him down, and Derek would continue to take whatever he could grab. I did not want to watch the rest of the play. I placed my napkin on the table. I pushed my chair back. The scraping sound cut through Marianne's tirade. She stopped mid-sentence and looked at me. "Where do you think you are going?" she demanded. "We are not finished. You are not leaving until you fix this." I picked up my purse. I stood tall, smoothing the front of my blazer. I looked at the three of them. My father, defeated but awake. My mother, furious and blind. My brother, smug and parasitic. And Sienna, the silent accomplice. I did not look at my father. I did not look at my mother. I looked directly at Derek. "I will not explain myself a second time," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. Josephine Marianne shouted. If you walk out that door, I turned my back on them. I walked out of the dining room, down the hallway, and to the front door. Behind me, I heard Derek say, "Let her go. Mom, she will be back crawling when she realizes she needs us." I opened the heavy oak door and stepped out into the cool night air. I closed the door behind me with a firm, decisive click. I did not slam it. I simply shut it. I walked to my car. I did not run. I did not cry. I checked my pulse as I sat in the driver's seat. It was steady. I looked back at the house. The light was still glowing in the dining room window. I could see the silhouettes of them moving, arguing, but it was like watching a television show with the volume muted. It had nothing to do with me anymore. I started the engine and backed out of the driveway. As I drove away, I realized something important. My father's defense was nice, but it didn't save me. I had saved myself the moment I walked out that door. The battlefield was behind me. Now, the war was going to be fought on my terms. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind that is aggressively ordinary. The sun was filtering through the blinds of my apartment, casting striped shadows across the hardwood floor. I was 3 hours into a coding session for a client's e-commerce site, wearing oversized sweatpants and enjoying the specific, quiet luxury of a space that belonged entirely to me. My lease was paid. My electricity was paid. The air I breathed was mine. I had not heard from my family since the dinner. 5 days of radio silence. In a normal family, silence might mean peace. In the Caldwell dynamic, silence was simply the time it took to reload the weapon. At 10:30 in the morning, a heavy grinding noise from the street below broke my concentration. It was the sound of air brakes hissing and a diesel engine idling. I lived on the second floor of a secure complex in a decent part of Cedar Hollow. We rarely had heavy traffic. I stood up, stretching my back, and walked to the window. I parted the blinds with 2 fingers, expecting a delivery truck or perhaps a maintenance crew. What I saw made my blood turn into ice water. A 26-foot moving truck was double-parked directly in front of the building entrance, blocking the fire lane. The hazard lights were flashing. The back ramp was already extended, a metal tongue lapping at the sidewalk. And there, standing on the pavement with a clipboard in his hand, was Derek. He was wearing sunglasses and pointing at the building, directing 2 burly movers who were hauling a familiar beige sofa toward the glass doors. It was the sofa I had bought for his townhouse 8 months ago. I felt a surge of adrenaline that was so sharp it was almost nauseating. This was not a visit. This was an invasion. I grabbed my keys. I did not bother to change out of my sweatpants. I did not put on shoes. I shoved my feet into slide sandals. I ran out of my apartment, down the single flight of stairs, and burst into the lobby just as the automatic doors were sliding open. Derek was the first one through. He looked up, saw me, and smiled. It was a tight, triumphant smile. "Hey, sis," he said, stepping onto the lobby carpet as if he were arriving for a scheduled brunch. "Perfect timing. Grab the elevator for the guys. Will you?" I stopped dead in the center of the lobby, planting my feet. "Stop," I said. My voice was loud, echoing off the marble floors. The two movers paused, the sofa hovering between them. They looked from me to Derek, bored and indifferent. Derek lowered his sunglasses. "Do not make a scene. Josephine, we are just moving in." "Moving in," I repeated. The words felt foreign in my mouth. "Yeah," he said, waving a hand dismissively. The landlord at the townhouse was being a jerk about the rent delay. He started eviction proceedings yesterday. Can you believe that? No grace period. So, we figured, why waste money on another deposit? You have that second bedroom upstairs doing nothing. It is perfect. He turned back to the movers. "Keep going. Guys, Unit 204, second floor." "No," I said. I stepped forward, placing my body physically between Derek and the elevator bank. "You are not bringing that furniture up," I said. "You are not coming in. This is not your home." Derek laughed. It was a dry, incredulous sound. "It is family, Joe. You are not going to leave your brother on the street. That is illegal or something. Moral law. Now move." I looked past him. Sienna was walking through the doors now. She was carrying a cardboard box labeled Kitchen Misk. Her face was flushed, and she was looking everywhere except at me. She looked exhausted. She looked like a woman who had been dragged along by a current she was too weak to swim against. "Sienna," I said. She flinched. She hugged the box tighter to her chest. Derek stepped into my personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and anxiety. "Stop talking to her," he snapped. "Look, we will just stay for a few weeks. A month, tops, just until I close the seed round. Then we will get a penthouse. You will beg us to stay then. But right now, we are doing this. It is happening." He snapped his fingers at the movers. "Ignore her. She is just having a bad morning. Up." One of the movers took a step forward. "If you take another step, I will call the police for trespassing." I said. The mover stopped. He set his end of the couch down with a heavy thud. He looked at Derek. "Look, buddy, we are paid to move furniture, not fight domestic disputes. Sort it out." Derek's face turned a mottled shade of red. "Josephine, you are embarrassing yourself. This is your family." I looked out the glass doors. The street was bright, and then I saw it. Parked across the street, in the shadow of an oak tree, was a black sedan. The engine was running. The window was cracked just an inch. I knew that car. I squinted. Through the tinted glass, I saw the silhouette of a woman with big sunglasses, her arms crossed over her chest, watching the scene unfold like a director monitoring a film set. Marianne. She was not here to help. She had driven them here. She had probably packed the boxes. She had orchestrated this. She knew that if she called, I would say no. So she chose the ambush. She bet on the fact that I would be too ashamed to cause a scene in my own building, that I would fold under the pressure of public scrutiny. She bet wrong. I turned back to Derek. "Mom is watching, isn't she?" I asked. Derek blinked. Caught off guard. "She wanted to make sure we got settled safe. She is worried about us. Unlike you." I pulled my phone from my pocket. I did not call the police. I dialed a number that was saved in my favorites. "Mr. Henderson," I said when the line connected. "This is Josephine Gray in Unit 204. Yes, I have an emergency. There are individuals attempting to move furniture into the building without a lease or authorization. They are blocking the lobby. I need you down here. Immediately." I hung up. Derek looked at me with genuine shock. "You called the landlord. Are you insane? He will kick you out." "No," I said. "He will kick you out." Mr. Henderson's office was on the first floor. Within 30 seconds, the door to the management suite opened. Mr. Henderson was a man in his 60s, a former military officer who ran the building with a rigid adherence to the rulebook. He walked into the lobby, his eyes scanning the movers, the sofa. And Derek, Ms. Gray? He asked. What is this? These people are trying to move into my apartment. I said, I did not authorize this. They are not on my lease. I have told them to leave, and they are refusing. Mr. Henderson turned to Derek. Is this true? Derek put on his best charm offensive. He smiled, extending a hand. Hi, I am Derek, Josephine's brother. We are just crashing for a bit. Family emergency. You know how it is. We will be out of your hair in no time. Mr. Henderson did not shake the hand. He looked at the clipboard Derek was holding. Sir, the lease agreement for this building strictly prohibits guests staying longer than 7 consecutive days without prior written management approval. It also prohibits moving crews without a scheduled reservation and a certificate of insurance. Do you have a reservation? Well, no. But do you have insurance on file with this office? It is my sister's place, Derek said, his voice rising. I do not need insurance to visit my sister. You do if you are moving a sofa across my lobby floor. Mr. Henderson said calmly. He pointed to the door. You need to remove this furniture immediately. If you do not, I will have the police remove it as abandoned property. Derek turned to me. His charm was gone. His face was twisted into a mask of pure venom. You are doing this on purpose, he hissed. You are enjoying this. I am protecting my home. I said, think about the baby, he shouted. The words echoed in the high-ceilinged lobby. The movers looked up. Mr. Henderson raised an eyebrow. What baby? I asked. Sienna is not pregnant. We are trying. Derek yelled. He gestured wildly at Sienna, who shrank back against the wall. We are trying to start a family, and you are putting your future niece or nephew on the street. What kind of monster are you? He was using a hypothetical child. He was using a non-existent human being as a shield for his own incompetence. It was the lowest thing I had ever seen him do. I looked at Sienna. Her eyes were wet. She looked miserable. But she did not contradict him. She let him use her body as a bargaining chip. I felt a wave of pity, but it was quickly replaced by resolve. There are other relatives. Derek, I said, my voice steady. There is Aunt Clara in Wyoming. There is Cousin Mike in Denver. They said no. Derek screamed. The truth hung in the air. So you asked them first. I said, you asked everyone else, and they all said no. Derek realized his mistake. He clamped his mouth shut. I took a step closer to him. And Mom? I asked, pointing to the black car across the street. She has a 4-bedroom house, the house you grew up in. Why are you not there? Derek looked away. Mom said she needs her space. She said she has done her time raising kids. She said it is your turn to step up. I almost laughed. It was so perfect. Marianne, the woman who preached family loyalty above all else, refused to let her precious son move back in because it would inconvenience her bridge nights. She pushed him onto me because she wanted the credit of being the matriarch without the work of being the safety net. So she sent you here to ambush me. I said, Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. The truck needs to move. Now. Derek looked at me one last time. His eyes were not the eyes of a brother. They were the eyes of a stranger who had been caught stealing. You are dead to me, he whispered. I did not flinch. I think we passed that point when you stole my credit card. Derek, he turned around. Load it back up, he screamed at the movers. The movers grumbled, lifting the beige sofa. They began to shuffle backward out the door. Sienna looked at me. For a second, just a second, I thought she might say something. I thought she might apologize. But she just turned and followed Derek, clutching her box of kitchen supplies like a life preserver. They walked out into the sunlight. I watched through the glass. I watched the movers shove the sofa back into the dark maw of the truck. I watched Derek get into the passenger seat of the truck, slamming the door so hard the side mirror shook. And I watched the black sedan across the street. As soon as the truck engine roared to life, the black sedan pulled away. Marianne did not wait for them. She did not wave. She simply drove off, disappearing into the traffic, leaving her son to navigate the mess she had helped create. I turned to Mr. Henderson. I am sorry about the disruption, I said. He looked at me. His expression was not angry. It was sympathetic. You have a difficult family, Ms. Gray, he said. You have no idea, I replied. He nodded. I will put a note in your file. No access for Derek Caldwell. And if that truck comes back, I will call the cops before they even put the ramp down. Thank you. I walked back to the elevator. My legs felt heavy, like I had just run a marathon. I rode up to the second floor, walked down the hall, and entered my apartment. I locked the door. Then I engaged the deadbolt. Then I put the security chain on. I walked to the window and looked down. The street was empty. The truck was gone. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were trembling now. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the cold reality of what had just happened. I had just made half of my family homeless. But then I remembered the car across the street. I remembered Marianne watching. I remembered Derek lying about the baby. They were not homeless because of me. They were homeless because they had burned every bridge they had ever crossed, and they were furious that I had finally fireproofed mine. I went back to my computer. I sat down. I tried to code, but my mind was racing. At 8 o'clock that night, my phone buzzed. I knew who it was before I looked. It was a text from Derek. I hope you are happy. We are at a Motel 6 on the highway. Sienna is crying. You think you won today. You think you are tough, but you have no idea what you just started. You will regret this. Josephine, I promise you, I read the message twice, in the past. Derek's threats were vague. They were emotional outbursts. You will be sorry. You are mean. This was different. This was calculated. You have no idea what you just started. I realized then that the moving truck was not the climax of the conflict. It was just the opening move of a siege. Derek was cornered. He was embarrassed. He was broke. And a narcissist without an audience is a dangerous thing. I did not reply. I did not block him. I needed to see what was coming. I took a screenshot. I saved it to the folder. Then I went to my front door and checked the lock one more time. The metal felt cold and solid under my fingers. I am not the one who will regret this. I whispered to the empty room. I turned off the lights and went to bed. I did not sleep well, but for the first time in my life, I did not sleep with the guilt of enabling them. I slept with the unease of a soldier waiting for the sun to rise on the day of battle. And I was ready. The digital assault began at 6 in the morning on Thursday. I usually wake up to a quiet phone, perhaps a few emails from clients on the East Coast, or a notification from my project management software. But when I rolled over and tapped my screen that morning, the light was blinding for a different reason. My lock screen was a wall of notifications, Facebook tags, messenger alerts, comments, reacts. My stomach turned over, a physical reaction to a digital threat. I sat up, pulling the duvet around my shoulders, and unlocked the phone. There it was. Derek had not slept. While I was trying to rest after the invasion attempt at my apartment, he had been crafting a masterpiece of fiction. He had posted a photograph of himself and Sienna sitting on the edge of a bed in a motel room. The lighting was dim and tragic. Sienna had her head on his shoulder, looking small and defeated. The caption was an essay. It is hard to type this through the tears. It began. I never thought I would be the one to air family laundry. But when you are pushed to the brink, the truth is all you have left. Yesterday, my own sister, a woman I have supported and cheered for her entire life, threw my wife and me out onto the street. We asked for a temporary place to stay while our new home is being finalized just a few days. We were met with coldness. We were met with the police. I felt my jaw tighten until my teeth ached. It breaks my heart to see how money changes people. The post continued. Ever since she started making a little cash, Josephine has forgotten where she came from. She has forgotten the family that raised her. She looked at us like strangers. I do not want her money. I just wanted her love. But I guess the price of admission to her life is too high for us now. Please pray for us as we figure out our next steps. We are survivors. But this betrayal cuts deep. I scrolled down. The post had been up for 6 hours. It had 73 likes and 42 shares. The comments were the worst part. Mrs. Gable, my third-grade teacher, had written, "Oh, Derek, I am so sorry. This is heartbreaking. Stay strong." My cousin Mike, the one who had refused to let Derek move in with him, commented, "That is messed up, man. Family is family." A woman I did not even know, a friend of Sienna's, wrote, "Some people are just toxic. You are better off without that kind of negativity." Sweetie, they were judging me. People who had not spoken to me in years. People who knew nothing about the bank transfers or the unpaid rent or the insults were acting as the jury in a trial I did not know was happening. They saw a sad photo and a well-written lie, and that was enough. I felt a vibration in my hand. A voicemail notification. It was Marianne. I pressed play, putting the phone on speaker as I walked to the kitchen to start the coffee maker. I needed the caffeine to survive this. "Josephine." My mother's voice filled the small kitchen. It was tight and breathless. "Have you seen Facebook? You need to fix this. Aunt Clara just called me asking if we are destitute. The neighbors are talking. This makes us look like a disaster. I do not care who said what to whom. You need to make peace with your brother publicly so he takes that down. Fix the image. Josephine. We have a reputation in this town." Click. She did not ask if it was true. She did not ask if I was okay. She did not scream at Derek for lying. She only cared that the neighbors were gossiping. The truth was irrelevant to Marianne. The only thing that mattered was the facade. I stood there, watching the coffee drip into the carafe. The urge to reply was overwhelming. I wanted to comment on the post. I wanted to scream in all caps. I wanted to upload the bank statements right there in the comments section and tag every single person who had offered him sympathy. But then I looked at the kitchen table where Miles was sitting. He had come over late the night before to make sure I was safe. He was watching me, his eyes dark and steady. "He is winning the narrative," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Look at this. Miles, they think I am a monster." Miles took the phone from my hand. He looked at the post, scrolled for a moment, and then set the phone face down on the table. "He is not winning," Miles said calmly. "He is loud. There is a difference. He is destroying my character." I argued. "If I stay silent, I admit guilt." Miles stood up and walked over to me. He placed his hands on my shoulders, grounding me. "Listen to me," he said. "The person who benefits from your silence will call you crazy when you finally speak. But if you speak the way he speaks with emotion and drama, you just give him what he wants. You become a participant in the circus. So what do I do?" I asked. "Just let him lie." "No," Miles said. "You do not argue with a liar in front of an audience that loves a show. You take away his stage." I looked at the phone. I looked at the comments. Money changes people. He was right. Money did change people. It made Derek entitled, and it made me a target. But money also left a paper trail. "I am going to the office," I said. I did not go to my actual office. I went to the second bedroom, which I used as my workspace. I spent the next 3 hours compiling a document. This was not a chaotic pile of papers like the one I had gathered before. This was a presentation. I printed the bank statements highlighting the $35,000 in transfers. I printed the lease agreement with my signature on the guarantee line. I printed the email where Derek admitted he had spent the rent money on business development, which I later traced to a luxury weekend trip in Vegas. I printed the text messages from last night where he threatened me. I punched holes in the pages. I placed them in a black binder. I made a cover page. Financial summary and liability report. Derek Caldwell. It looked like a legal indictment. It felt cold and heavy in my hand. I knew where he would be, even though he had been evicted. He had until noon today to surrender the keys to the townhouse landlord. He would be there, scavenging the last of his things, likely trying to steal the copper wiring if he thought he could get away with it. I did not call ahead. I drove to the townhouse at 11 in the morning. The moving truck was gone, but Derek's leased SUV was in the driveway. The front door was open. I walked in. The house echoed. It smelled of dust and stale pizza. The living room was empty. The floors scuffed where the furniture had been dragged out. I found Derek in the kitchen. He was leaning against the granite counter, scrolling on his phone. He looked up when I entered, and a slow, arrogant grin spread across his face. Well, he said. Slipping the phone into his pocket, the prodigal sister returns. Did you come to apologize? Or did the shame finally get too heavy? I stopped in the middle of the room. I did not smile. I did not yell. I saw your post. I said, yeah. He chuckled. Popular. Is it not? People really resonate with the struggle of the common man against the greedy elite. You are famous, Joe. He pushed off the counter and walked toward me. Confident. He thought he had me cornered. He thought the social pressure had broken me. Mom called me. He said, She says you are crying. She says you want to fix it. So here's the deal. You transfer $5,000 to my account today, call it a severance package, and I will take the post down. I will even write a follow-up saying we made up. How does that sound? He was extorting me. He was using his own lies as leverage to extract one last payment. I lifted the black binder. I am not here to negotiate. Derek, I said. I walked over to the kitchen island and slammed the binder down. The sound cracked through the empty house like a gunshot. What is that? He asked. Eyeing the black plastic. That, I said, is the truth. I opened it to the first page. The summary of transfers. $35,000. I said, verified by bank timestamps. I flipped the page. The rent payments. The text messages where you admitted to gambling the company funds. The email where you called Mom a controlling hag when she refused to give you gas money last year. Derek's face paled slightly. Where did you get that I keep everything? I said, you know that? I looked him in the eye. Here's how this works. I said, my voice dropped dead calm. You are going to take out your phone. You are going to delete that post. And then, you are going to write a correction. He laughed, but it was nervous now. You are bluffing. You will not show that to anyone. You are too private. You hate drama. I do hate drama. I agreed, but I hate being called a thief more. I pulled out my own phone. I have already drafted a direct message. I said, I have a list of every single person who commented on your post. Mrs., Gable, Cousin Mike, Sienna's friends, the neighbors. I tapped the screen, hovering my finger over the send button. If that post is not gone in 60 seconds, I'm going to send this digital file to every single one of them. I will tag them. I will tag your old college roommates. I will tag the investors you are trying to woo. I will let them see exactly who funded your lifestyle for the last 3 years. Derek stared at me. He looked at the binder. He looked at my phone. You wouldn't, he whispered. It would humiliate the family. Mom would die. Mom is already dead to me in this conversation. I said, 50 seconds. His eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape route. He realized I wasn't playing the game by the old rules. I wasn't trying to save the family honor anymore. I was willing to burn the house down to kill the termites. Josephine, come on, he pleaded, his voice cracking. If you send that, I will never get funding. No one will trust me. Then you should not have lied about the person holding the receipts. I said, 30 seconds. He fumbled for his phone. His hands were shaking. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the terrified franticness of a child caught with a match in his hand. Okay, he shouted. I am doing it. He tapped furiously. I watched him. It is gone, he said, showing me the screen. Deleted? Now the correction. I said, no, he said. I cannot. That makes me look weak. The binder. I reminded him. He gritted his teeth. He typed. He showed me the screen. My previous post was written in a moment of high emotion and stress. I misunderstood the situation with my sister. We are handling this privately. Please respect our privacy. It was weak. It was vague. It took no real responsibility, but it was an admission that he had lied. Post it, I said. He pressed the blue button. There, he spat. Are you happy you just humiliated your own brother? I closed the binder. I picked it up. I did not humiliate you. Derek, I said, I just stopped you from using my name to sell a fake tragedy. I turned to leave. I walked to the door, the sound of my heels clicking on the hardwood. "You are cold," he yelled after me. "You are ice cold." "Josephine." I paused at the threshold. I tried to be warm, I said without turning back. "You burned it out of me." I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and exhaled. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. It was the release of tension. I had done it. I had stared him down and he had blinked. I checked Facebook. The post was gone. The new status was up. The comments were already coming in. Confused, asking what happened. Derek wasn't replying. I felt a sense of victory. It was small, but it was real. I had protected my name. I drove back toward my apartment, feeling lighter. I thought the worst was over. I thought the battle was contained to the family circle. But when I stopped at a red light, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was not a personal email. It was to my business address. I glanced at it. Subject query regarding project ethics. My heart skipped a beat. The sender was Sarah Jenkins, the owner of Boutique Loft, one of my oldest and most consistent clients. I opened the email. "Hi, Josephine. I hope you are well. I saw a screenshot circulating this morning regarding a dispute with your brother. I also received a direct message from a user named Derek C., claiming that you misappropriated funds from a joint venture to start your agency. He claims the intellectual property for the designs I use might actually belong to him. I know this sounds crazy, but he sent a very official-looking document. Can you clarify? We cannot afford any copyright issues." The light turned green. I did not move. A horn honked behind me. I drove through the intersection, my mind reeling. He had deleted the post. Yes. But while I was driving over there, or perhaps before, he had done something far more dangerous. He had gone after my clients. He wasn't just venting to the neighbors anymore. He was actively trying to sabotage my livelihood. He had told Sarah that he owned my work. He was claiming that my agency, the one I built from scratch, was stolen property. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I thought I had won a skirmish at the townhouse. I was wrong. I had just walked into a war. Derek realized he could not get money from me, so he had decided to stop money from coming to me. I pulled over to the side of the road. I read the email again. He sent a very official-looking document. Derek didn't know how to create official documents. He couldn't even file his taxes. Someone helped him. I thought of the black sedan. I thought of Marianne's voicemail about reputation, and I realized that the rot went deeper than just a jealous brother. I put the phone in the cup holder. The binder on the passenger seat seemed insufficient now. I needed more than bank statements. I needed a lawyer. "You want to play business?" "Derek," I whispered. "Fine, let's play business. The best revenge is not burning your enemy's house down. It is building a castle right next door and not inviting them to the housewarming." After the townhouse debacle and the social media skirmish, I realized that playing defense was a losing strategy. As long as I was reacting to Derek, I was still in his orbit. I was still the little sister trying to put out his fires. I needed to step out of the smoke and start a fire of my own, one that would consume his ego simply by existing. I called Noah Kingsley on a Friday morning. Noah was a ghost from my college days. While Derek was the guy who wore suits to class to network, Noah was the guy in the back row wearing a hoodie, silently coding brilliance that he was too shy to pitch. We had worked on a capstone project together, and I remembered him as the only person I had ever met who delivered more than he promised. He was working IT support for a dental supply company when we met at a diner downtown. He looked tired. He was wasting his brain fixing printers, and I was wasting my money on a leech. "I have capital," I told him, pushing a folder across the Formica table. "And I have the marketing infrastructure. You have that logistics software you were building in your dorm room, the one that optimizes local delivery routes for small businesses." Noah looked at the folder, then at me. He adjusted his glasses. "That code is sitting on a hard drive. Josephine, it needs work. It needs a server. It needs time." I wrote a figure on a napkin and slid it toward him. It was $15,000. It was less than half of what I had thrown into the black hole of Derek's life over the last 2 years. "I am not offering you a loan," I said. I am offering a partnership, 40% equity for me, 60 for you. I handle the business, the branding, and the client acquisition. You build the product, no buzzwords, no vision boards, just code that works. Noah stared at the number. He didn't smile. He didn't jump up and hug me. He took a pen and started scribbling calculations on the back of the napkin. I can have the beta ready in 6 weeks if I quit the dental job, he said without looking up. Done, I said. The feeling that washed over me was entirely new. It was clean. For the first time in my adult life, I was giving money to a man, and I did not feel a knot of dread in my stomach. I was not paying a ransom. I was making an investment. The next month was a blur of legitimate, exhilarating work. We rented a tiny co-working space downtown, a glass-walled box that smelled of sanitizer and ambition. There were no 3-hour lunches. There were no vague discussions about synergy. There was just Noah typing furiously in the corner, and me on the phone selling the concept to local couriers. We called it Route Smart. It was boring. It was unsexy. And it worked. By week 4, we had 3 beta testers. By week 5, the software actually did what we said it would do. I established a new rule for my life during this period. I called it the Iron Curtain. I sent a formal letter to my parents and Derek via a courier service. It stated that any communication regarding finances, property, or legal matters was to be directed to my newly retained attorney, a shark of a woman named Ellen who enjoyed billing by the minute. The silence from the family was heavy, but I was too busy to notice. Then, we got the email. A mid-sized logistics firm in Denver wanted a demo. They were interested in a buyout or a licensing deal. This was the Holy Grail. It was the kind of meeting Derek had been pretending to have for a decade. I was sitting in the office, reading the invitation, when my phone rang. It was Marianne. I hesitated. I was high on adrenaline, feeling invincible. I answered. Hello, Mother, Josephine. Her voice was trembling, not with sadness, but with a suppressed fury. I heard about Noah Kingsley. I leaned back in my chair. News traveled fast in Cedar Hollow. He is my business partner. I said, partner. She spat the word out. Aunt Clara saw you two at the diner. She says you gave him a check, a large check. I invested in a company. Mom, that is what business people do. You gave money to a stranger, she shouted. You have your own brother sleeping in a motel well. A cheap apartment now. Thank God, struggling to get his ideas off the ground. And you give your money to some nobody. Noah is not a nobody, I said coolly. He is a producer, and unlike Derek, he actually built something. How can you be so spiteful, she asked, her voice dropping to a hiss. You are doing this to hurt Derek. You are throwing away the family inheritance on an outsider just to make a point. It is not family inheritance, I corrected her. It is my earnings. And yes, I chose a stranger. Do you know why? Because the stranger respects the contract. You are cold. Josephine, you have lost your way. You chose money over blood. I hung up. I stared at the phone. Her words should have hurt. They used to hurt. But this time, they just felt like data. She had confirmed exactly what I suspected in her eyes. My money was not mine. It was a family resource that I was misappropriating by not giving it to the designated heir. The confirmation gave me a strange sense of peace. I wasn't the bad guy. I was just the rogue bank teller who stopped handing out cash from the vault. 2 days later, Derek appeared. I was walking into the co-working building, carrying 2 coffees. He was leaning against the brick wall near the entrance, wearing a suit that looked slightly wrinkled, as if it had spent the night on the floor. Hey, Joe, he said, pushing off the wall. I didn't stop. I kept walking toward the glass doors. I have a lawyer. Derek, call her. Come on. Do not be like that, he said, falling into step beside me. He didn't look angry. He looked slick. He had that salesman mask on, the one he wore when he was about to ask for a favor. I heard about the Denver meeting. Big stuff. Congratulations. I stopped and turned to him. How do you know about the Denver meeting? I haven't told Mom. I haven't told anyone except Noah. Derek shrugged, a little too casually. People talk. Cedar Hollow is a village. Look, I am not here for money. I promise. I just, I did some thinking. You and Noah, you guys are good at the tech side, but you need a face. You need someone who can close the room. I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. After calling me a black sheep, after the townhouse invasion, after the Facebook libel, he was pitching himself for a job. You want to join the team, I asked? My voice flat. I want to help, he said, flashing his smile. I can handle the pitch. These corporate guys, they eat me up. I speak their language. We could be a power trio. Family business, just like we always talked about. He was trying to rewrite history. He was trying to slide back in as if the last month had been a minor blooper reel. Derek, I said, you are not a closer. You are a liability. His smile faltered. And for the record, I continued, if you ever come near my office or my partner again, I will file for a restraining order, and I will attach the police report from the townhouse incident to the application. I walked through the doors and scanned my badge. As the glass slid shut, I saw his face transform. The salesman vanished. In his place was something darker. He looked at me with a cold, dead stare that made the hair on my arms stand up. He didn't look desperate anymore. He looked focused. I went upstairs and found Noah. Change all the passwords, I said, setting the coffee down. Noah looked up, startled. What? Everything, I said. Email, server access, the GitHub repository, the bank logins, two-factor authentication on everything. If it has a lock, change the key. Why? Noah asked. Because my brother just offered to help, I said, which means he is planning to hurt us. We spent the afternoon locking down our digital fortress. I audited everything. I went back through the old shared drive I used to have with Derek, the one I thought I had closed. It was closed, but I noticed something in the access logs from 3 months ago. Derek had downloaded my contact list. He had my client emails. He had the vendor list, and he probably had the contact info for the investors I had been researching. I felt a chill. He wasn't just guessing about the Denver meeting. He was tracking me. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 10 in the morning. It was a Zoom call, a preliminary pitch before they flew us out. On Monday afternoon, an email landed in my inbox. It was from the assistant of the lead investor at the Denver firm. Subject: rescheduling tomorrow's meeting. Hi, Josephine. Mr. Sterling has a conflict tomorrow morning. Can we push the meeting back to 2 in the afternoon? Same Zoom link. Let us know if this works. Best. Sarah, executive assistant. I reached for my mouse to click reply and confirm. It was a standard request, but then my hand froze. I remembered Derek's face through the glass. He looked focused. I looked at the email address. It said Sarah@minsterlinglogistics.net. I pulled up the previous emails from the firm. I looked at the domain name. The real firm used sterlinglogistics.com. The email was a fake. It was a spoof. If I had replied and agreed, Noah and I would have shown up at 2 o'clock, but the real investors would have been waiting at 10. We would have been a no-show in the startup world. Missing the first pitch meeting is a death sentence. It screams incompetence. I sat there, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a plea for gas money. This was industrial sabotage. Derek had bought a domain name that looked like the investors. He had set up a fake email server. He had drafted a professional email. This took time. This took effort. And it took money he claimed he didn't have. He would rather spend $50 to destroy my opportunity than spend $50 to buy his own groceries. I called Noah over. Look at this, I whispered. Noah read it. He checked the headers. This was sent from a server hosting service in Arizona. He said, it is not them. He tried to kill the meeting. I said, I picked up my phone. I didn't call Derek. I didn't call Marianne. I called the real Sarah at Sterling Logistics. Hi, Sarah. This is Josephine Gray. I just wanted to confirm our meeting for 10 o'clock tomorrow. We are still on. Correct? Yes, absolutely. The real Sarah said. We are looking forward to it. Is there a problem? No, I said, my voice steady. No problem. Just double-checking the time zones. We will be there. I hung up. I looked out the window of our 4th-floor office. Cedar Hollow looked small from up here. The cars looked like toys. I realized then that the war had shifted. Derek wasn't trying to pull me back into the crab bucket anymore. He realized I had escaped. Now, he was trying to shoot me down. He didn't want my money. He wanted my failure. He wanted to be able to point at me and say, "See, she is a fraud too. She is just like me." I turned to Noah. "We are going to crush this meeting," I said. "And after we do?" Noah asked, looking at the fake email on the screen. "What do we do about this?" I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Case File Criminal Intent. I dragged the spoofed email into it. "After we win," I said, "we are going to trace that domain registration. We are going to find the credit card used to pay for it. And if it is his card, or Mom's card—" I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. I used to think my brother was just a loser. Now I knew he was something much worse. He was an active threat, and you do not negotiate with threats. You neutralize them. "Get the slide deck ready." "Noah," I said, "we have a meeting at 10, and we are going to be 5 minutes early." The text message arrived on a Tuesday evening, just as the sun was setting behind the Rockies, casting long, bruised shadows across my living room floor. It was from a number I did not recognize. There was no greeting. There was no signature. It was just 7 words that turned my blood cold. "Check your mailbox. You will want to see this." I stared at the screen. My first instinct was to ignore it. I had been dealing with enough harassment from Derek to last a lifetime, and I assumed this was just another one of his mind games. Perhaps a glitter bomb or a threatening note cut from magazine letters like a bad movie villain. But something about the phrasing felt different. It was not aggressive. It was urgent. I put on my shoes and walked down to the lobby. The bank of metal mailboxes gleamed under the fluorescent lights. I unlocked box 204. Inside, there was a single manila envelope. It was thick, heavy, and completely blank on the outside. No return address, no stamp. Someone had hand-delivered this. I carried it upstairs, the weight of it feeling disproportionate to its size. I locked my apartment door, sat down at my kitchen island, and reached for a letter opener. I sliced the top edge. I slid the contents out onto the granite counter. It was a stack of paper, about 20 pages thick. I turned over the first page, and my breath hitched in my throat. It was a printout of an email chain. The sender was Derek Caldwell. The recipient was Marcus Thorne. I knew Marcus. He was a venture capitalist I had interned for during my senior year. He was a man who commanded respect in the Denver tech scene, someone I had cultivated a relationship with for 3 years. I had planned to pitch RootSmart to him once we had a solid user base. I read the subject line, Exclusive Opportunity Logistics Optimization Platform, Seeking Seed Funding. I looked at the date. It was sent yesterday morning. I began to read the body of the email. "Dear Marcus, hope you are well. It has been a while since we connected through my sister. I wanted to bring you in on the ground floor of a project I have been architecting for the last 6 months. It is a routing algorithm that targets small to medium delivery fleets." I flipped the page. Attached to the email were PDFs. They were my PDFs. They were the wireframes Noah and I had built 2 weeks ago. They were the market analysis charts I had created in Excel until 3 in the morning. They were the branding guidelines I had paid a freelancer to polish. Derek had not just stolen the idea. He had stolen the files. But he had done something even more brazen. In the footer of the strategy document, where it used to say, "Prepared by Josephine Gray," it now read, "Prepared by Derek Caldwell, CEO founder." He had used a PDF editor to swap the names. I flipped to the next section of the stack. It was another email chain, this time to Elena Rostova, an angel investor who had mentored me in college. Same pitch, same stolen files, same lie. He was telling them that he was the architect. He was telling them that I was just a consultant. He had used briefly but had to let go due to creative differences. My hands were shaking, but this time, it was not from fear. It was from the sheer, icy clarity of what I was looking at. This was not a brother asking for a loan. This was not a family dispute. This was corporate espionage. This was fraud. I looked closer at the papers. There was something odd about them. On the bottom of the 3rd page, There was a faint, gray timestamp. It was the automatic footer that some printers add. Printed 06/28/2025, 11:42 p.m. Device Brother H.L. Home, User D. Caldwell. But there was something else. On the margin of the email to Marcus, there was a digital sticky note that had been printed along with the document. It was a draft note, something Derek must have typed to himself before sending, likely to remind himself of the lie he was spinning. Note: tell Marcus that Joe is out of the picture. Say she had a mental break. He will buy it. I felt a wave of nausea. He was not just stealing my work. He was actively poisoning my professional reputation to clear the path for his theft. He was selling my mental instability as a feature of his pitch. I did not scream. I did not cry. I stood up and walked to my home office. I turned on my scanner. I fed every single page into the machine, creating a high-resolution digital copy. Then, I opened my email. I composed a message to Ellen, my lawyer. Subject urgent. Evidence of IP theft and defamation. Ellen, please see the attached. My brother is currently pitching my proprietary materials to investors under his own name. He is also claiming I am mentally unfit to do business. I need a cease and desist order sent immediately, and I want to know our options for a lawsuit regarding trade secret misappropriation. I hit send. Then, I picked up my phone. I did not call Derek. I called Marcus Thorne. It was 7:30 in the evening. I knew Marcus often worked late. He answered on the third ring. Josephine, he said, sounding surprised. I was just thinking about you. Your brother sent me a very interesting deck yesterday. Hello? Marcus? I said. My voice was steady, professional, and completely devoid of the familial shame I used to carry. I am calling because I have reason to believe you received a pitch deck for a platform called Root Smart, or a variation of it. Yes, Marcus said. Smart Root Logistics. Derek said he has been building it. Marcus, I said, I want you to look at the metadata of the files he sent you. Or, if you have a moment, I can email you the original source files, created on my server, dated 3 weeks prior to his email. There was a silence on the line. The intellectual property he pitched to you belongs to me and my partner, Noah Kingsley. I continued. Derek Caldwell has no ownership, no equity, and no role in this company. The documents he sent you were obtained through unauthorized access to my private server. I heard the sound of Marcus typing in the background. I am sending you a folder right now. I said, it contains the original wireframes, the trademark filing we submitted last month, and the contract Noah and I signed. The typing stopped. I see. Marcus said. His tone had shifted. It was no longer friendly. It was the cold, hard tone of a man who realized he was almost scammed. He told me you were having health issues, Marcus said quietly. He told me he took over the project to save your investment. He lied. Marcus, I said, he is attempting to defraud you. I appreciate you telling me. Josephine, Marcus said, I do not do business with thieves. I hung up. I called Elena next. The conversation was shorter, sharper. Elena was furious. She had almost set up a meeting with him. She promised me that Derek's email was going into her spam folder, and his name was going onto her blacklist. By 8:15, I had cut off his legs. He just didn't know it yet. I sat back in my chair. The room was dark, lit only by the glow of my monitors. I felt like a surgeon who had just removed a tumor. It was bloody, it was messy, but the patient was going to survive. Then, the inevitable happened. My phone rang. It was Marianne. She didn't wait for me to say hello. You are evil, she screamed. I held the phone away from my ear. You are trying to destroy him, she shrieked. Derek just called me. He said Marcus Thorne's assistant emailed him and canceled his meeting. She threatened legal action if he contacted them again. That was you. You poisoned the well. He stole my company. Mom, I said calmly. He was just borrowing the idea, she yelled. He was going to cut you in once he got funding. He told me. He said he was doing the hard work of selling it so you could focus on the tech. He was helping you, he told Marcus. I was having a mental breakdown. I said, is that helping me? Marianne paused, but only for a second. She pivoted, as she always did. He was just explaining why you were not at the meeting. He had to say something. You are so rigid. Josephine, you care more about your precious intellectual property than you do about your brother's survival. He has a wife. He has rent to pay. He is a criminal. Mom, I said, and if he continues, he will not just be unemployed. He will be in prison. Do not you dare, she hissed. Do not you dare threaten this family with the law. You are a cold, heartless girl. I do not know where we went wrong with you. We went wrong when you taught him that it was okay to steal from me. I said. I hung up. I blocked her number for the night. I could not listen to it anymore. I went back to the kitchen and looked at the papers again. I needed to understand the scope of this. I logged into the state business registry. I searched for Derek Caldwell. Nothing. Then I searched for the name Marcus had mentioned, Smart Route Logistics. There it was, an LLC formed 3 days ago. The registered agent was not Derek. It was a generic legal service, but the principal address. It was the address of the motel where Derek and Sienna had stayed for 2 nights before finding their apartment. I dug deeper. I looked at the trademark database. He had filed a preliminary application for the logo, my logo, which I had designed. He had not just copied the files. He had built a shell company to house the stolen goods. This was premeditated. He had planned to sell the company to an investor, take the cash, and disappear before anyone realized the code didn't exist or that the real owner was his sister. It was an exit scam, and I was the victim. But as I gathered the papers to put them back in the envelope, my thumb brushed against the back of the last page. It was the page with the sticky note on it. I turned it over. On the back, there was a faint smudge. It looked like a coffee stain, but right next to it, printed in tiny, almost invisible font at the very bottom edge of the paper, was a URL string. It was the source URL from a web-based email client. Mail, Google, com, mail U1, drafts. I looked closer. The account name in the URL string was cut off, but the first 3 letters were visible. CIA. I froze. I looked at the envelope again. I looked at the lack of return address. I looked at the way the flap had been sealed not with saliva, but with a piece of clear Scotch tape, neatly cut. Derek was messy. Derek licked envelopes. Derek tore paper. Sienna was precise. Sienna was the one who organized his life. And the email draft. It was from a drafts folder. That meant it hadn't been sent yet when it was printed. Someone had to be logged into the account to print a draft. Derek wouldn't print his own draft to send to me. That made no sense. Sienna had printed it. Sienna had put it in the envelope. Sienna had dropped it in my mailbox. I thought about the moving day. I thought about how she had looked at me, clutching her box of kitchenware. I thought about the silence at the dinner table. She was watching him spiral. She was watching him lie. And she knew, perhaps better than anyone, that if he succeeded in this scam, he would eventually crash and burn, and he would take her down with him. She wasn't saving me. She was saving herself. She was giving me the ammunition to stop him before he committed a felony that would land them both in jail. I felt a strange, complicated emotion. It wasn't gratitude, exactly. It was a recognition of shared trauma. We were both hostages of the same man's ego. I had escaped. She was still in the room. I picked up the envelope. This changes everything. I whispered, this wasn't just proof of theft. This was proof of a mutiny. I walked to the window. The city was dark now. Somewhere out there, Derek was probably pacing in his cheap apartment, wondering why Marcus hadn't called back, wondering why his grand plan was stalling. He didn't know that the call was coming from inside the house. I went back to my computer. I opened the folder where I kept the evidence. I renamed it. It was no longer family dispute. I typed in the new name, Caldwell v. Caldwell Federal Copyright Infringement. I turned off the lights. I had the evidence. I had the witness. Even if she didn't know she was a witness yet, the investigation was over. The prosecution was about to begin. The legal mechanism I set in motion on Wednesday morning was not designed to start a conversation. It was designed to end one. I sat in the leather chair across from Ellen, my attorney, as she reviewed the final draft of the cease and desist order, Ellen was a woman who did not believe in adjectives. She believed in statutes, timestamps, and the terrifying clarity of federal law. She slid the document across the mahogany desk toward me. It was thick, printed on heavy bond paper, and smelled faintly of toner and finality. "Read the demands," she said, clicking her pen. "Make sure you are comfortable with the nuclear option." I looked at the text. It was beautiful in its brutality. To Mr. Derek Caldwell, you are hereby notified that you are in violation of federal copyright laws regarding the intellectual property known as Route Smart, the wireframes, code, and marketing materials you have presented to third parties. Specifically, Mr. Marcus Thorne and Ms. Elena Rostova are the sole property of Ms. Josephine Gray and Mr. Noah Kingsley. Demand is hereby made that you immediately cease all use, display, and distribution of said materials. You must destroy all digital and physical copies in your possession within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in an immediate filing for injunctive relief and a civil suit for damages, including but not limited to statutory damages for willful infringement. I looked up at Ellen. "Send it via courier." I said, "I want a signature required. I want a timestamp of the moment he touches the paper. Consider it done." Ellen said. I left her office and went straight to my apartment. The legal firewall was up, but I needed to secure the digital perimeter. I spent the next 6 hours doing a complete forensic lockdown of my life. I did not just change passwords. I burned the keys. I logged into my domain registrar and enabled a registry lock, requiring a verified photo ID to make any changes. I rotated the API keys for the Route Smart servers. I revoked access for every device that had logged into my Google account in the last 3 years. I set up alerts on my credit report for any new inquiries. By the time I finished, my digital footprint was Fort Knox. If Derek wanted to get in, he would need a quantum computer and a miracle. But while I could lock down the servers, I could not lock down the past. On Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. I braced myself for Marianne's shrieking or Derek's threats, but the caller ID made me pause. Dad. Gordon never called. In the hierarchy of communication in our family, he was the silent observer, the man who nodded and retreated to the garage. If he wanted to say something, he usually relayed it through my mother. I answered, "Hello, Josephine." His voice sounded rough, like he had been clearing his throat for 10 minutes before dialing. "I need to see you. Is Mom with you?" I asked, my hand hovering over the end call button. "No," he said, "just me. Meet me at the park." The one by the river, in an hour. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat on a bench watching the water rush over the gray stones. The Cedar River was high this time of year, swollen with snowmelt. It was loud, drowning out the sound of the traffic on the bridge above. My father arrived right on time. He walked slowly, his shoulders hunched in his old denim jacket. He looked smaller than I remembered. The fight at the dinner table seemed to have aged him 5 years in a single week. He sat down next to me. He did not hug me. We were not that kind of family. He stared at the river for a long time. "You sent the lawyers," he said. It was not a question. I had to. "Dad, he is stealing from me. He is trying to sell my company." Gordon nodded slowly. "I know. Marianne is screaming about it at home. She says you are vindictive. She says you are trying to ruin the family name." "And what do you say?" I asked, turning to look at his profile. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a small, tattered booklet. It was navy blue, the kind of passbook savings book banks used to issue 20 years ago. "I say you should have done it a long time ago," he said. He handed me the book. I opened it. The pages were yellowed. The first entry was dated 24 years ago, the year I was born. Deposit $50. I flipped through the pages. Every month, there was a deposit. $50, $100, sometimes just 20. It was consistent. It was disciplined. By the time I was 18, the balance should have been nearly $15,000. But then, I saw the withdrawals. August, 6 years ago, withdrawal. $3,000, November, 5 years ago. Withdrawal, $4,000, January, 4 years ago. Withdrawal $5,000. By the time I graduated high school, the balance was $12.50. I looked up at him, confusion clouding my vision. What is this? I started that fund the day we brought you home from the hospital, Gordon said, his voice thick with shame. It was for college. I put my overtime money in there. I wanted you to have a start. I wanted you to go to school without worrying about debt. I never saw this money. I whispered. I worked 3 jobs in college. I took out loans. I know, he said. He rubbed his face with his hands. Your mother took it. The air left my lungs. She had access. Gordon continued. She told me she was moving it to a high-yield account for you. She told me she was investing it, but she wasn't. Where did it go, I asked, though I already knew the answer. Derek, Gordon said. He spit the name out like a curse. Derek got into trouble his sophomore year. Gambling. Then a car accident he caused because he was drunk. Then he owed money to some bad people. Marianne drained your college fund to pay his debts. She said she was protecting the family. She said you were smart, that you would get scholarships, that you could handle the struggle. She said Derek needed the help more. I stared at the numbers. Every late night I spent scrubbing tables at the diner during finals week. Every time I skipped a meal because I needed to buy a textbook. Every time I cried in my dorm room because I didn't know how I would pay tuition. My mother had watched me struggle. She had praised my work ethic, and all the while, she knew she had stolen my safety net to pay for Derek's mistakes. She didn't just enable him. Dad, I said, my voice trembling with a cold rage. She sacrificed me for him. Gordon nodded. Tears were streaming down his weathered cheeks now. I let it happen. Joe, I knew something was wrong. I saw the statements, but I was afraid of her. I was afraid of breaking up the house. I sacrificed you too because I was a coward. He reached out and touched my hand. His fingers were rough and cold. I am sorry, he whispered. I cannot pay you back. I am retired. But I wanted you to know, you are not the black sheep. Josephine, you are the only clean thing that ever came out of that house. I looked at the river. The water kept rushing, indifferent to our tragedy. Keep going. Dad, I said softly. He looked confused. What? Keep telling the truth. I said, that is the only payment I want. When she lies, you speak. When Derek lies, you speak. I will. He promised. I drove home in a daze. The revelation did not break me. It calcified me. I realized that my entire life had been a rigged game. I had been playing with a handicap while Derek was playing with cheat codes, and my mother was the game master manipulating the scores. When I got back to my apartment, night had fallen. I sat in the dark, processing the betrayal. Then, my phone buzzed. It was a text message. Unknown number. I am sorry about the envelope. I was scared. But I cannot do this anymore. He is planning something big for Tuesday. Be careful. I did not need to ask who it was. The phrasing was timid, apologetic. Sienna. She had sent the envelope with the evidence. She was the leak. And now, she was warning me. He is planning something big for Tuesday. I looked at my calendar. Tuesday. That was 3 days away. Why Tuesday? The answer arrived the next morning in the form of a mass email. It was a newsletter from the Cedar Hollow Chamber of Commerce. Upcoming event. Emerging Founders Night. Join us this Tuesday at the Community Center for a showcase of local innovation. Keynote speaker, Derek Caldwell, CEO of SmartRoute Logistics. I stared at the screen. The audacity was staggering. He had received the cease and desist. He knew I had the evidence. He knew his investors had walked away, and yet, he was doubling down. He was going to get on a stage in front of the town council, the local business leaders, and the press, and he was going to present my software as his own. I understood his strategy immediately. It was a move of desperation. He figured that if he claimed the company publicly, in front of witnesses, it would become a fact. He was betting that I would be too embarrassed to cause a scene at a community gala. He was betting that I would not walk onto a stage and call my brother a thief in front of the mayor. He thought he could use social pressure to silence me, just like he did at the graduation party. He thought I was still the girl who would smile and swallow the insult to keep the peace. He was wrong. I picked up the phone and called Ellen. "Ellen," I said, "are you free on Tuesday night? I can be." She said, "Why, Derek is hosting a presentation." I said, "He is going to try to legitimize the stolen IP. Do you want me to file for an emergency injunction to stop the event?" Ellen asked, "We can get a judge to shut it down." I thought about it. I could stop him. I could have a sheriff serve him papers in the parking lot. It would be quiet. It would be efficient. But then I thought about the college fund. I thought about the text from Sienna. I thought about the black sheep toast. If I stopped him quietly, he would spin it. He would tell everyone that his jealous sister used legal loopholes to crush him. He would play the victim again. No, I said, let him speak. Let him get up on that stage. Let him load his slides. Let him tell the lie one last time. "Josephine, that is risky," Ellen warned. "Once he presents, the bell is rung. Not if we ring it louder." I said, "I want you to prepare a package. Ellen, the cease and desist, the copyright registration, the bank statements showing he has zero ownership, the affidavit from Noah, and the email metadata showing the theft. I have all that." Ellen said, "Bring it to the event." I said, "And bring copies for the press." "You are going to confront him. I am not going to confront him." I said, looking at the city skyline. "I am going to foreclose on him." I hung up. I walked to my closet. I pushed aside the soft sweaters and the casual jeans. I pulled out a dress I had bought for a gala in Denver a year ago. It was navy blue, structured, and sharp as a knife. I looked at myself in the mirror. Derek wanted a show. He wanted to be the star. I would give him his audience, but he forgot one thing about the black sheep. We are the ones who do not follow the herd. And when the wolf comes knocking, we are the only ones who are not afraid to bite back. I sent a reply to the unknown number. "Thank you. Sienna, I will be there." I put the phone down. "Let's finish this." The Cedar Hollow Community Center was buzzing with the nervous energy of small-town ambition. It was Tuesday night. The air inside the auditorium was thick with the smell of cheap cologne and floor wax, and the room was packed to capacity. The Emerging Founders Night was the biggest business event on the local calendar, a place where handshakes turned into contracts and rumors turned into investments. I stood in the back of the room, hidden in the shadows of the tech booth. I was wearing the navy blue dress I had chosen, sharp and tailored, feeling less like a sister and more like an executioner. Beside me stood Ellen, my attorney. She held a thick leather portfolio against her chest. She did not look nervous. She looked bored, which was the most terrifying thing a lawyer could look. Noah was there too. Standing on my other side, he had his arms crossed, watching the stage with a look of cold anticipation. We had arrived early. We had spoken to the event coordinator, a harried woman named Brenda who terrified easily when presented with federal copyright statutes. We had set the stage. Now, we were just waiting for the actor. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the center of the stage. Derek walked out. I had to give him credit. He knew how to wear a suit. He looked charismatic, confident, and utterly trustworthy. He waved to the crowd, flashing that lopsided grin that had charmed teachers and lenders for decades. "Thank you. Cedar Hollow," Derek said, his voice smooth over the microphone. "It is good to be home." In the front row, I saw the back of Marianne's head. She was sitting up straighter than anyone else in the room. She was practically vibrating with pride. To her, this was the vindication. Her son, the golden boy, was finally shining, and the misunderstandings with his sister were just footnotes in his biography. My father, Gordon, sat next to her, looking down at his shoes. He knew what was coming. Derek clicked a remote. The massive screen behind him lit up. Smart Route Logistics, the future of last-mile delivery. I felt a physical jolt in my stomach. The logo on the screen was mine. I had sketched it on a napkin in a diner 3 months ago. I had refined it in Illustrator. I had chosen that specific shade of electric blue. Seeing it there, projected above my brother's head as his creation, felt like a violation. Derek began his pitch. He used the words Noah and I had written. He described the algorithm using the metaphors I had crafted. We are not just moving packages, Derek said, pacing the stage like a Silicon Valley guru. We are moving trust. We are building a system where small businesses can compete with the giants. The audience nodded. I saw a few local investors taking notes. They were buying it. He was selling them a stolen car, and they were kicking the tires and smiling. Marianne turned to the woman next to her, Higgins, the neighbor who had laughed at me at the party and whispered something, pointing at Derek. See her body language screamed. See how brilliant he is. I waited. I let him get through the market analysis. I let him get through the growth projections. I wanted him to climb as high as possible so the fall would be absolute. Finally, Derek reached the closing slide. It was a photo of him, looking visionary, with his contact information. I am asking you tonight, Derek said, spreading his arms wide, to believe in this vision. I am asking you to trust in a local family that has always stood for integrity. I am asking for your investment to help us launch. That was the cue. Ellen did not run. She did not shout. She simply walked down the center aisle. The click of her heels on the linoleum was rhythmic and loud in the silent room. Derek squinted against the spotlight. He saw a figure approaching, but he did not recognize her. He smiled, thinking it was an eager investor coming to shake his hand. Yes, Derek asked, shielding his eyes. Do we have a question already? Ellen stopped at the edge of the stage. She did not use a microphone. She did not need one. Mr. Caldwell, she said, her voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. I am Ellen Vance, representing Josephine Gray and Noah Kingsley. The smile froze on Derek's face. A ripple of whispers went through the crowd. Marianne whipped her head around, her eyes widening behind her glasses. I am serving you with a federal cease and desist order regarding the intellectual property you are currently displaying. Ellen continued, holding up the portfolio. You are in violation of copyright law. You are presenting stolen materials. Derek laughed. It was a high, nervous sound. This is a joke, right? He said into the mic. My sister has a weird sense of humor. Everyone, very dramatic. He looked at the tech booth, waving his hand. Cut the mic, he hissed. Get her out of here. But the tech booth did not cut the mic. The tech booth cut the screen. The projector went black. My logo vanished. In its place, the harsh white light of the blank screen illuminated Derek's silhouette. Then, the event moderator walked onto the stage. She took the microphone from Derek's hand. She did not look at him. She looked at the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, we have received credible legal documentation prior to this event, indicating a dispute over ownership of this presentation. As per our bylaws, we cannot allow a pitch to continue under active legal challenge. What Derek shouted, grabbing for the mic, but she pulled it away. You cannot do this. This is my company. We will move directly to a mandatory QA regarding the validity of the business, the moderator said. The room was deadly silent. This was not the script. This was a train wreck, and nobody could look away. A hand went up in the third row. It was a man in a gray suit, Mr. Henderson, a local angel investor and, coincidentally, the owner of the building where I lived, the man who had kicked Derek's moving truck out of the lobby. Mr. Henderson stood up. Mr. Caldwell, he said, your sister has provided a digital forensic report to the organizers. It claims that the files you just showed possess metadata linking them to her server, created 3 weeks before your LLC was formed. Derek's face was glistening with sweat. My sister she is unwell. Derek stammered. He looked at Marianne for help. Mom, tell them she is having a breakdown. She is jealous because I cut her out of the deal. Marianne stood up. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. It is true, she cried out, her voice cracking. Josephine is confused. She gave him the idea. It is a family business. I stepped out of the shadows. I did not go to the stage. I stood in the back, in the light of the exit sign. I am not confused. Mother, I said. Heads turned. 200 people looked at me. I felt the weight of their gaze. But for the first time, it did not crush me. It fueled me. I held up a folder. I have the bank statements showing zero capital investment from Derek, I said, my voice steady. I have the contract signed by my partner, Noah. And I have the email logs where Derek spoofed an investor's address to sabotage my meeting last week. Lies, Derek screamed from the stage. He looked manic now. She is lying. She is trying to ruin me because she is the black sheep. She hates this family. He was unraveling. He was using the old insults, the old triggers, hoping they would work one last time. Tell them, Sienna Derek shouted, pointing at his wife in the second row. Tell them how she threw us on the street. Tell them she is crazy. All eyes turned to Sienna. She was sitting with her hands clasped in her lap. She was wearing a simple gray dress. She looked small. She looked terrified. Sienna, baby, please, Derek pleaded, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Back me up. Sienna stood up. She turned to face the room. Then she turned to look at Derek on stage. Her eyes were red, but her chin was high. She did not throw us on the street. Derek, Sienna said. Her voice was quiet, but in the silence of the room, it sounded like a bell. We were evicted because you gambled the rent money. A gasp went through the room. Marianne fell back into her chair as if she had been shot. Sienna. Shut up, Derek hissed. And the presentation. Sienna continued, her voice gaining strength. I watched you print it from her draft folder. I watched you use the PDF editor to change the names. Sienna Derek roared, stepping toward the edge of the stage. You stole it. Derek, Sienna said. She looked at me across the room, and for a second, our eyes locked. A silent acknowledgement passed between us. You stole it all, and I am done lying for you. She picked up her purse. She walked to the side aisle and began to move toward the exit. The room erupted. Investors were standing up, closing their notebooks. The moderator was signaling for security. The murmurs turned into a roar of judgment. Derek stood alone on the stage. The founder, the visionary. He looked at the audience, his eyes wide and frantic, realizing that the reflection in their eyes was no longer of a golden boy. It was of a fraud. He looked at Marianne. Mom, he whimpered. Marianne sat frozen. She stared at the stage, her mouth slightly open. For 30 years, she had written the script. She had edited reality to make him the star. But she could not edit this. She could not edit a room full of witnesses and a daughter-in-law who had finally had enough. Her illusion shattered not with a bang, but with the quiet, humiliating truth spoken by the people she had tried to silence. My father, Gordon, stood up. He did not look at Derek. He did not look at Marianne. He put his hat on his head and walked out the side door, leaving them to the wreckage they had built. I looked at Derek one last time. He was small. He was just a man in a suit he couldn't afford. Standing in front of a blank screen, I turned to Ellen. We are done here, I said. I pushed open the double doors and walked out into the cool night air. The noise of the auditorium faded behind me. The stars were bright above Cedar Hollow. I pulled out my phone. I sent one final text to Ellen. Proceed with the civil suit for damages and file the restraining order. No settlements, no meetings. All contact through you. I walked toward my car. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. They had called me the black sheep for years. They meant it as an insult. They meant I was the outcast, the one who didn't fit. They were right. I didn't fit. I didn't fit into their lies. I didn't fit into their dysfunction. I didn't fit into their cage. Being the black sheep wasn't a punishment. It was a survival strategy. It meant that when the slaughter came, I was the only one standing on the outside of the fence, free. I unlocked my car, got in, and drove away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. There was nothing back there I needed. My future was ahead of me, and for the first time, I owned every single inch of it. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and liberation. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please drop a comment below with your city or country, so we can see how far our community reaches. If you enjoyed seeing the truth come to light, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, And hit that hype button to help us share this story with more people who need a reminder that the truth always wins.